Intro. The 1940s was a time period of war, but also adapting to a post-World War II world, where a lot of things have changed. It's a post-war time, which means that there's always tensions between some countries. Not all of them, just some. We know which countries those are really, but the world changed after World War II due to many factors, but mainly the fact they didn't want a repeat event to occur or anything of the like. They didn't want anything like that war to happen again. Since a post-World War II world is different from a pre-World War II world, we have to know the sudden shift, aka World War II itself, changing the world and, like why that is and what happened during it and all that. So we start there, really, picking up from the last decade. We all know the story of World War II was the painter, where it started when he invaded Poland in 1939, and then was able to take France for a little bit afterwards. But in the end of it all, the Allies, aka the good side, basically, was able to defeat them. But we also know Japan was there as well. During this time, though, there was mass casualties of everybody involved, but mainly also of the Jewish population through the painters' Germany, where they wanted to basically eradicate them. It was mechanized. This is called the Holocaust, by the way, and it killed over 6 million Jewish people in many ways, because this was horrifying if you look at anything that they did, because there were many ways that they died. It's sad to see. It's the war that also killed the most amount of people out of any war. Any conflict ever in history, this one beats all of them. So that means over 70 million people have died throughout this conflict. And it's something that depends on basically who you ask. But the numbers range from 70 to 85 million. A lot of these people were civilians, but mainly from European and Asian countries, as the US, being lucky, isn't on any of those continents and doesn't have to worry that much. We're over here, and they're over there. We don't have to do that. There's no conflict over here domestically, at least. World War II also led to the Europe that would form over the next few decades, as it was basically Western countries, not including Germany, versus the evils, as that's what it was seen as, really. That's what the reality of Eastern Europe was post-World War II. Eastern Europe was the part of Europe that was affected most because of how many invasions in different countries went through these places, like Poland, Hungary, and all these other ones. The ones close to Russia, overall. So, the satellite states, really. When you look at the civilian casualties, Poland was the country that lost the most amount of people as a percentage of their population as well, which really drastically impacted their country even afterwards, since, they lost nearly 20% of their population. That is 1/5 of the entire Polish population gone. Since this was one of the deadliest conflicts, if not the, it shows how many of the people who died weren't military. Because no country has 20% of their population as a military. And that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense, even in war, to do that. 20% is a lot. A lot of casualties that happened in the war were Allied civilians because of the attacks that Germany did during the time. In Britain, like in London, in France, how they just took that, really. And all these other, Allied Western countries. A lot of people died through the bombings in Britain that weren't even military, since London is a dense city, and so was France, since Paris was taken by the Germans during World War II. This was definitely a blow to the Allies because of how big France was. It's a big country in Europe was a lot of people, so it was one of them fell, so you kind of have to watch out, making sure the second one doesn't fall. Yeah, and then you have it. It falls to the Germans, which means that basically one half of the major Western European countries have fallen, because around this time it was different. Germany wasn't good during this time, like they kind of are today. So you don't have them as an ally. You have Britain, you have France. There's only those two. So, like, France falls, Britain's next. But, like, Britain is on an island. So there's literally no way that Germany could get to that with an actual military on land. So, like, they're going to be more safe, but still, France is, like, fallen. So you don't want that to happen as well. Now, when it comes to the U.S., the United States of America, it was the only country to basically fight in both sides of the war, like heavily, both the Asian front and the European front. This is because of, where it's located and how it's right in between both of them. It's like this big island, and it's just, wow, what a coincidence. And it spans the entire continent in width. So the U.S., for the first part of the war, tried to stay neutral because, parties, but gave military aid to Britain and the Allies through many things. It was just a coincidental thing, since the country at the time was more isolationist compared to today. Like, you couldn't have, like, a globalist person running. You couldn't have that. Also, FDR is still the president, because the 2-term limit wasn't really a full thing. It was just kind of like, oh, guys, let's keep up tradition. And so, he was just elected to a 3rd term, which means that the president stayed the same for the majority of World War II. Only really changing at the end, if we're being honest. But the one thing that changed all of this is Japan, when they bombed Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. The day that'll live in infamy is usually what it's called. Japan bombed the U.S., and as you do, you have to protect yourself by entering the war. What else can you do? Germany then declared war on the U.S. because of the Axis powers alliance or whatever. Literally, just felt like it, I guess, because that was out of the blue, because I know they're allies, but Japan could have just been on their own. Let's be honest. So that means the U.S. officially enters war on the European front as well, to defeat Italy and Germany, mainly by taking back France and all these countries through D-Day and many operations. But mainly in Japan, as they controlled a lot of East Asia and a bunch of islands. We did this cool thing in the war called island hopping, and eventually getting to mainland Japan. It was when you went from one island, one small little island, to the next, and then you just kind of continued. You just have small ore farms until you get to the mainland Japan, I guess. It's really cool. Here is where we showed off this cool thing. When we got to mainland Japan, we showed off this cool little thing we discovered called a nuclear weapon. We actually showed 2 of them, but, that clears it. It's over. We won. We won against Japan, and that's about how the war ended overall. They surrendered. We won. The good side's back on the menu. The U.S. also took a picture, the iconic photo of General Douglas MacArthur next to their emperor, to propagandize to Japan, how much larger than they are compared to their emperor. Yo, your emperor is so short. Look at us. Look at our tall dude who's 6 foot compared to your little dude. He's not high and mighty. Submit to us. That's basically what that photo was meant to do. Of course, following World War II is a big task that would require a lot of things, because we do not, and I mean we do not, nobody wants this, nobody wants something like that happening again. I don't think anybody who is sane and reasonable, or not insane crazy, wants another 70 to 85 million people dead, or probably more, because today it's more people are on this planet. So, how do you do this, you may be wondering? It's simple. You just form the United Nations. Make the 5 people on the Allied side, the good side, the ones that defeated Germany, the better side since they won. But also they can veto any vote because they're a permanent member. Now, what does a permanent member do exactly? It just makes it so that the 5 countries you had involved, can veto any action which isn't overpowered in any way possible. Is it a stupid mechanic in the system supposed to make people equal and all countries equal? Just a little yeah. But wait, guess what? Not the current day issue of the 1940s. That could be saved for later if it ever occurs. But the 5 countries that have this ability are the US, the UK, Russia, China, and France, which are the Allied-based countries of World War II. So, that's a huge pot. That's a diverse pot. Because that's going to be crazy to get anything done with. Like, any of those countries. All of them have to agree on one thing. Never going to happen. The winners, of course, will get to keep winning through this method. You don't win if you don't have that mentality, since the other countries had to join and form the peace coalition, basically. So they don't have that epic power of denying everything that they don't like. And that's just because they didn't win. They should have just won, this diverse pot of allied countries should have. Since you have these weakened countries from war, it leads to a thing where these weakened countries that have these bloodied cities and these body-filled streets basically can't do much as a nation. There are many examples of this. Let's take Japan as an example for this. It's this very military-based country where in battles that they would do this thing called kamikazes, where they would kill themselves basically for their country. It was a very high amount of nationalism for Japan, let's be honest. Then after the war, and also to be honest, after 2 nukes as well, but afterwards they surrendered because of a weakened state of theirs. After this, in about 1947, they adopted what we today would call a freedom democracy constitution, which basically just allows it's allied with ours. That's really all you need to know about it. But one of these things that you can look at is the section that said Japan can't use war to settle disputes, but also that it can't have a standing military that has the potential to start war. So, this makes sense, as you know. They are one of the people that were part of the Axis powers, and therefore they need to build trust with other countries so that they won't do anything like that again. Because we don't want that. We can't have that. This is also because it was a very big strike on the board. Being moved from yellow light to red light on the board, in 1st grade. Except this time, it's stuck there for a while. You don't stay there for a day or 2. And so, we kind of have to put our military there, or, supply them with a military, because they're really close to, 1, China, post, communist takeover, and then 2, Russia. So we kind of have a military there, just a little bit. Now, when it comes to Germany, the other really big country that was impacted by this war, it's much different. They were still a country in a way, literally in a way, but they were massively divided because of the way that they were taken back during the later half of the war. It was divided into West and East Germany, where the Allies controlled Western Germany, since they got there first, which basically includes Munich and all the big cities closer to France and the Netherlands, all that. Eastern Germany was controlled by the USSR, which was communist, bad, and this was everything east, which included half of Berlin. You don't even get all of it. And all of those places. Somehow the West controlled the other half of Berlin, but there was influence on both sides, really. So this caused a little split in Germany in how it actually developed. You can still see this, by the way, today. You look up anything relating to Germany, lifespan or anything, you see where it was divided. It's actually insane. Eastern Germany was more communist and all of that, while the West was more capitalist. This split made the western side be seen as better, and everyone wanted to live there because of how poor the East was. When you're poor, you want a better life, obviously. You need money, and you want that life that can provide that, a better life. So, of course, you're going to go to the West because that's the one that can do that. That's what the point of the Marshall Plan was, to fix the post-war Europe as it was destroyed. But by funding the countries like France or the UK or Western Germany and being like, yo, look at how much money these guys have. Yo, isn't that crazy? It kind of like made them be like, oh, well, they do. And so this made a lot of people distrust the USSR and its leadership. And now it is like basically run in a way because they saw that and they saw all the money. They saw, whoa, that is crazy. That's a lot of money. And they saw the authoritarian rule of like Joseph Stalin. And on the inside, they were like, well, I do kind of like that more money aspect. I kind of like that. And so they kind of started to not like the system they lived in. This view of leadership also helped make like Western Europe be seen as the better, the richer side, and the better side to live on overall, since people had more freedoms, they had more stuff, and they can do more. Freedom is always good. I can't lie. It's mainly good. You can't lie. This started to make tensions between the USSR and Western Europe and the US grow just because of this shift in political ideology and how much it mattered to both of them. Again, something to worry about later. That's not a today issue. This also led to the Nuremberg trials, which you might have heard of, which were a big case that said that you, as a soldier, have a moral conscience to not follow orders that are ethically or morally wrong, and you can just say no. This was big, huge even, because we all know the Holocaust was bad. I mean, if you think it's good, I think you may need, like, some psychiatric help. And so we knew it was bad and that it shouldn't have happened. We all know that there were people who were ordered to do it, and they did nothing. They could have done something, but they did nothing to stop it, except just, like, follow orders. They submitted. They were like, oh, yes, I'll do that. I was just following orders. It's a classic line. It's the classic line that everybody tries to use. Little do they know, that's what they tried during the trials, and they were like, buddy, what are you talking about? And concluded that's not good enough. That is not good enough. If you know what you're doing is wrong, no matter what it is basically now just logic and reasoning to say no to anything that's wrong or does wrong actions. Guys, I can't do a bad action even though like I was ordered from above to do that. Fork, fan, and kitchen statement over here, but some people stay loyal to the state. And this ruling would be pretty good, basically, because, you have to not have bad decisions made by people, like, and have them done. It would be pretty good at making sure people knew the difference between following orders and committing ethically wrong actions, since sometimes you can, like, blur the line a little bit, but, you gotta have a, like, moral compass to be like, no, I will not be doing that. So what does this do in the long run and prevent future atrocities from occurring mainly in Europe, because that's where it happened, where people all live, because Europe's population is crazy dense compared to America. So this was like a warning to anyone involved with these crimes, but also to anyone in Europe trying to do it, like being like, whoa, I want to do that again, because they're insane. The rules and precedents set after World War II were the things that helped make the semi-peace that lasted, for a long time, I would say, after it, where it was no big wars because, like, between the countries. For a long time, no big countries had any wars. During the decade, it was only really the tension between the USSR and the West that was this big war in heavy quotes because it was really not a war. It was just tensions. It started the Cold War, basically. The Cold War is the thing that put people on edge because of how two countries who were basically both very powerful could take out the world if they were ever to fight, because nuclear weapons. So, tensions, not war. So that couldn't happen. That fight could not happen. The world would basically, it would be over with. So you can't have that. Overall, the 1940s was a decade that was full of violence, as you would expect, but also one that has defined most of the modern world through things like alliances and different things that would go on for a long time after the decade ended, and even World War II ended. It was an important one in many ways, but it still has its effects on society to this day in a lot of ways, a lot of more ways than you would expect. A lot more happened than what I talked about because, it's a decade, that's 10 years, but these were the most important parts of it and the parts that influence the world now. So it's the parts that matter and should be talked about. But that's about it, really. So if you want to comment your thoughts, you can. That's your First Amendment right, or whatever. If you also want, you can like and subscribe. Pretty please.